there. Good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat from Springfield to the Cellblock. We're going to be talking about the fall of Michael Madigan because they've set a date for sentencing. Fee-lony. Illinois Democrats, they're coming after your property rights, forcing free markets, your landlords, your insurers, your payment processors. They want to force them out so they can step in. We're going to get to all of it. And a little bit later, law, order, and liberal lunacy. ICE raids in Chicago. We talked about the ICE raids in Chicago. Yes, the LA riots as well. I wanted to open the show this morning talking a little bit about what I had saw at a Normal West graduation. I had gone. I'm a youth leader, and I was watching some of my youths graduate from Normal West. And man, you may think that these are totally unrelated events. They're not. The LA riots are not by accident. Years of social conditioning, indoctrinating, and teaching our youth to be little activists and teaching them that America sucks. This is contributed to the LA riots. So high school students like this one, I don't know her name. She was the first one actually called up there to receive her diploma. She's a Normal West graduate. And she's going to grow up. She's going to vote. She's going to vote for governors like Gavin Newsom. And Gavin Newsom campaigns on this idea that America is racist and that we're obligated to not have any sort of federal immigration laws because we're inherently racist. That's what these Democrats truly believe, that no, we don't want any federal immigration laws. No, we want everybody to pour over this border. And we're going to get to, of course, Kat Abou-Ghazaleh. She's running in the Illinois Congressional District 9. She wants that seat. She's a extreme leftist. Hassan Piker. She has ties to Hassan Piker. You can look him up on Google. He's an extreme leftist anti-Semite. And Kat Abou-Ghazaleh, she admits out loud on the CNN panel with Scott Jennings that she thinks illegal immigrants should receive free health care courtesy of the taxpayers. So I'm going to play that clip here in just a second, but I want you to watch this. Now, this was at Normal West. She grabs a Mexican flag and she just starts waving it like crazy. She's very aggressive about it. This Normal West graduate, no idea who she is. Take a look. And this is, I took out the audio. I didn't know if she was a minor or not. I don't want her name out there. I don't even know her name. I didn't listen to it. But she takes out this Mexican flag and she flies it at this Normal West graduation as she's receiving her diploma. And the reason why I wanted to show you that this morning is that this is all planned. Your teachers are raising activists while you're at work. These kids are going to vote for politicians who spit all over our sovereignty. And it's because their teachers made them little activists and they're out there and they're setting fire to cop cars. I don't know if this girl's going to wind up doing that one day. Who knows? But I can tell you something right now. That girl, she's an activist. And she graduated an activist, and they're all flying Mexican flags in America. Isn't it funny? They're flying the Mexican flag, but they're fighting like hell to not be sent back to Mexico. I'm so lost. Let's get to Kat Abou-Ghazaleh. Like I said, she's really, really radical. She believes that illegal immigrants, not only should they break our federal immigration laws and be here, but they should also get taxpayer-funded health care. Take a listen to this.
Deserves health care.
Even illegals?
Every single person in the world deserves
Just for the
healthcare.
record, as a candidate, you're for illegal aliens getting Medicaid.
I think everyone in the world deserves
That's a yes.
healthcare.
That's a yes.
I'm such a
That's a
modern-
Democratic
I mean,
position.
it is a yes, but
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a Democratic
Everyone in the
position.
world
Illegal
deserves
aliens should
healthcare.
get Medicaid.
but I mean, I mean,
How is this controversial?
I don't. But
How is it controversial?
How is it controversial to think they don't want someone to die in the hospital because they can't afford
What do you
it?
think pays for health care when undocumented people show up at a hospital?
Who pays for that?
We all pay for it.
Exactly.
Including
I mean, we all
undocumented
pay
people
for
because
it.
they actually contribute.
That's the point. That's the point.
We do realize that
I just wanna
undocumented
remind-
Who pays for the welfare system in this country
I wanna
generally?
remind you
Taxpayers.
and perhaps-
Are you for it or not?
Can I start my logic train
Are
with
you for it or not?
My logic train starts with
Just-
the fact
just
that
say
I don't
yes.
want to kick 11 million people off
Do you
of
want
Medicaid.
the illegal aliens on or not?
Do I want first of all, do I want undocumented citizens to
Just
have
say
health care?
yes.
The answer is yes.
Scott,
Okay.
if someone is
More
undocumented,
Democrats.
do you want them to not get insulin if they're diabetic?
I want Medicaid to exist first and foremost for American citizens who need it. That is what I
What about
want.
second? How about this? When the people that are
passionate.
picking your peaches. Yeah, I'm passionate
Very
about
passionate
Americans.
for the illegals.
Sorry,
No, I'm passionate for
How dare
Americans.
you want people to be alive? How dare you?
Passionate for the illegals.
You
Bring
know-
more.
No, I actually want
But yes,
safe and secure borders.
You need more. To make your vision of America work, we need more illegals who get more benefits. That's your version of America.
No, what I want from America is a place that was promised to us, Scott.
To the
Like
illegals?
you do. No, it was promised to us. It was promised to
Us
us,
who?
not us, me and you, black and white, brown. Scott, do you think that your family was
You were
born
born
here?
here.
You weren't born here, Scott.
I was born in
First of all,
Dawson Springs.
where does your family come from? My family wasn't born here. My family was actually from Sierra Leone.
You're making
Scott,
a
I'm making
passionate argument
Correct,
for a
about
country
what our
built on unfettered illegal immigration, and that is not
No,
anywhere
our
near
country,
a politically popular
Our
position.
country is built on immigration, period.
What kind?
Period.
What kind?
Oh, and first of all, before we go to commercial, what kind? What kind of immigration was I brought here?
You're already
with?
in the hole. You sure you don't want to stop
No,
digging?
because it was slavery. That's not immigration.
Come on.
Well, okay.
Come on, what?
All right, there's a lot to be said.
Come on.
Hold on.
No, but you just can't
we-
say come on.
There's really not a lot to be said. Okay. This Kat Agabazale, she was on the CNN panel and she admitted out loud that she wants taxpayers to pay for free healthcare for illegal immigrants. And meanwhile, you look at our state, Illinois, she's running in the congressional district not for that seat. You look at Illinois, we're into debt up to our ears. $38.1 billion in outstanding obligations. We have a staggering $143.7 billion unfunded pension liability. And here she is. She's wanting to give out freebies to those who break our federal immigration laws. This is insanity. It's painful. And look, I'm not saying that people don't deserve help. There's a lot of people out there who don't deserve health care. Let me be clear. Let's not pretend that everybody is the best person on earth. There are some pretty awful people out there. I'm talking your child predators. I'm talking your murderers. There are some pretty awful people out there. And no one's saying that people don't deserve health care, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, oh yeah, like everybody deserves health care. You know, it's a privilege. Somebody actually has to provide you that health care. That's a privilege. If it takes somebody else's time, talent, and treasure to provide you that service, that is not a right. Healthcare is not a right. It takes somebody else's time, talent, and treasure to provide you that service. You could learn it all yourself and provide yourself your own healthcare. Okay? Or don't be such a jackwagon and maybe your family would be around to provide you health care. This is like really at the end of the day, you can provide your own health care or your family can provide you health care. Okay. If you're going out and you're outsourcing that service to somebody else, that's somebody's time, talent, and treasure, somebody we have to pay to do that service. It's not a right. Something that's up to you. Your own health care is actually up to you. Now, whether you decide to outsource that or you have to outsource that because you have alienated your whole family and nobody wants to be around you, so you have to go and outsource your own health care, right? Or you don't know how and you haven't learned how to provide yourself health care, then you have to outsource it. But if you can't afford it, learn how to do it yourself or have a family member learn how to do it for you. So she's basically saying here, if it were up to her, she'd roll out the welcome mat for the whole world and let them flood in and break our entire system. And the fact that she thinks that's compassionate is absolutely ridiculous. This is not compassionate. You're going to strain the system. And we're not actually going to provide more people care. So what ultimately happens when you flood the system, a lot of Americans are going to be tossed to the side. They're not going to have access. This is not going to provide more access to healthcare for Americans. It's going to make healthcare even more unaffordable for Americans who are, trying to care for the world's sick population. Why is that on us? And these people are relying on emotional arguments. She doesn't have any kind of real argument. This is just purely emotional. Why is that on us? Why is that on Americans? Why do we have to take on the world's burdens? And no, there's no other country in the world that would give Americans free healthcare. Why do we have to provide that privilege to people who don't deserve it? To the Kilmar Abrego Garcias who traffic people over our border, are human smugglers, break our federal immigration laws, pounds his wife's face in or beats her up. That's not me saying it. That was her saying it, his own wife. Why do we have to provide those people health care? Again, why does America have to take on this burden of the rest of the world? And I find it interesting. She goes with this emotional argument. She doesn't have any kind of real argument. And she, says illegal immigrants are dying in the hospitals because they can't afford it, as if, illegal immigrants, this is the reality of the situation. If you're an illegal immigrant, you go to a hospital and you seek care, they're going to provide you the care. Okay. What winds up happening is that you skip out on your hospital bills and somebody has to pay for that. And that ultimately comes from the taxpayer. And you're on Medicaid and Medi-Cal, whatever program you're on here in the state of Illinois. We had 2 programs for illegal immigrants. J.B. Pritzker, because he's probably running for president and he knows that this is not a very popular issue, politically, this is you just destroyed your campaign, Kat Agabazale. This is not a popular political opinion, that illegal immigrants should have taxpayer-funded healthcare. But anyway, we had 2. JB got rid of one of them. Now senior illegal immigrants get free healthcare. And if you're younger than, I think it's like 65, then you don't get the free healthcare anymore here in the state of Illinois. And he did that probably because he's running and he knows how unpopular this is with American people, because Americans know how expensive healthcare is, and it's only going to get more expensive when we take on the world's burdens. But what ultimately happens to the illegal alien who goes into the hospital, they get care. And she's like ignoring that fact totally. That, they can't afford it. They skip out on their hospital bills and it ultimately gets paid by you and I. That's the reality of the situation. So, it's just this claim. They don't provide any logic. How we're going to do this. They just say people deserve health care and they throw that out there. A CMS administrator, Dr. Mohammed Oz, says, quote, Medicaid is not and cannot be a backdoor pathway to subsidize open borders. This is exactly what's going to happen if they don't get their way. So this is the CMS administrator, according to Dr. Mohammed Oz. That's exactly what's going to happen if they don't get their way. It does absolutely nothing for Americans, to help Americans. What you're ultimately doing with this free healthcare, you're opening up the border and you're incentivizing everybody from the planet to come to America to receive care. We don't have even enough nurses. We don't even have enough people in the healthcare industry to fulfill that need. Nonetheless, Jennings, of course, he made the argument that this is politically she just committed suicide. Like, her career is over, which I don't really think that Kat Agabazale, she really wants a political career. I think she's just running for clout. She's a YouTuber, and I think she's just running for clout. A lot of politicians kind of do this. But like I said, this is not compassionate. It's worse for everybody. It's worse for the illegals who want that care. It's worse for the American taxpayer. Nobody ultimately gets care if we flood the system, and it's just unrealistic. So I want to shift gears. We're going to talk about Michael Madigan a little bit later. You won't want to miss it. Special guest Dean Fletcher is going to join us. Olympia and Ridgeview, right here in central Illinois. They're going to get new property tax bills. They're going to be a little bit higher due to a miscalculation by the McLean County Clerk's office. And what happened ultimately was Olympia passed this 2024 referendum, and the property tax should have been higher. The bill should have been higher, but they sent out lower bills. So the second installment is going to be slightly higher to make up for that difference. We're going to get to that, but first I do want to get to Michael Madigan. And we're just going to expose the rot here, the rot in the floorboards of Illinois. Okay, so with none other than Michael Madigan, the once untouchable, now convicted ex-speaker of the House, Illinois House, Michael Madigan. So for 5 decades, Michael Madigan, you might not know, you're just tuning in. I've got archive shows on Mike Madigan. You guys can check those out on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook. They're archived, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Today's show brought to you by PatriotPumpEnergy.com. If you want to support the show, go buy a bottle of Patriot Pump Energy today. It's really simple. Use promo code ConservativeCat for $10 off at checkout. So for 5 decades, Michael Madigan, he ruled Illinois like a king. Not a governor, not a mayor. He was a political kingpin. Okay, and he didn't just pass bills, he brokered power, controlled funding, manipulated elections, steered millions in deals behind closed doors. And now the empire that he built is finally starting to crumble. So he was convicted on 10 felony counts in February, and he's facing sentencing come June 13th. So that's just a few days away. And the federal prosecutors want 12.5 years for this guy and $1.5 million in a fine. So they think, his lawyers, of course, Michael Madigan, they think that home confinement is totally fine. Probation is good enough because, 83-year-olds who destroy public trust for half a century. He was speaker for like 50 years. It was insane. He deserves a couch and a nurse and some hot soup, and instead of a cell and a sentence. No. He deserves a cell. I don't care how old Michael Madigan is. He deserves a cell. Okay, let me ask you something. If your grandfather robbed millions from a bank, he'd go to jail, right? If he robbed millions from a bank. So why should this be any difference? He just robbed the taxpayers through backroom deals. He took bribes from energy companies, and he destroyed transparency in government. And people are saying, oh, he should walk free because of his age. No, age is not a get out of jail free card. Want to be very clear about that. And if you're too old to serve the time, maybe you were too old to run a corrupt political machine in the first place there, Mike. The left tries to humanize criminals, and when it's their guys, on the stand, they try to humanize them. But let me remind you, if you're old enough to commit the crime, you're old enough to serve the time. So this isn't anything new. Illinois has been playing footsies with corruption for decades, and it's still going to continue despite Michael Madigan possibly being sentenced. Ed Burke, he got 2 years for corruption after prosecutors asked for more than 6, by the way. And let's not forget Rod Blagojevich, Democrat, who finally got a long sentence. He did. He got a long sentence. And then guess what? Donald Trump, he pardoned him. He commuted his sentence. I want to be clear. There's a big difference between pardoning and commuted. Commuted his sentence, and he served for 8 years. But here's why. He paid the price when there were a lot of other people involved in this, and this is why Donald Trump pardoned Rod Blagojevich, is because he wasn't the only player, and Donald Trump understood that. He just got caught, and he was the one who took the fall for everybody in this apparatus. And unlike Madigan, he actually served a long time, and now they're talking about Michael Madigan being on house arrest and like pardon or probation, and he wants to cut a check from his lawyer's trust fund and provide money to just make this all go away. And Rod Blagojevich, he served time because he was selling that seat. And I want to talk about a phone call with Governor J.B. Pritzker, because believe it or not, our current governor had a very interesting phone call. And nobody really talks about this in the mainstream news, but this is a huge deal. He had a phone call with the convicted felon. He wasn't a convicted felon then. That was Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich. And folks, this tells you all you really need to know about how the political sausage is made in this state, is if you listen to this phone call. Okay, so I'm going to rewind. And this is really why President Donald Trump gave Rod Blagojevich this pardon. I think it's because of this phone call. And Donald Trump knew that, hey, there was a lot of people involved in this, and Rod Blagojevich was the one who went down. And it's only because Governor J.B. Pritzker played it smart in this phone call. So let's rewind to 2008. Barack Obama had just been elected president, and his U.S. Senate seat in Illinois was up wide open. And guess who had the power to appoint his replacement? That was Rod pay to play Blagojevich. Okay, so yes, he selling Barack Obama's U.S. Senate seat. And this is the guy who sent Rod Blagojevich, if you're not familiar with Illinois politics, he was sent to prison for literally selling the seat to the highest bidder. Very, very corrupt. Not saying that Rod Blagojevich shouldn't have gone to prison. I'm saying that there were a lot of people involved in this, and they didn't go to prison, and they're out, and they're making billions. Governor J.B. Pritzker, one of them, walking free. And at the time of this phone call, he wasn't a public servant. He wasn't in any kind of office. He wasn't even a candidate. He was just a Democrat donor making friendly small talk with Rod Blagojevich. And this phone call was tapped by the FBI. Okay, so this is why we have the phone call now, is because it was tapped by the FBI and recorded by the FBI. So what was said in this infamous phone call? Rod Blagojevich and J.B. Pritzker, they weren't discussing how best to serve you, the Illinois taxpayer. Oh, no. They were talking about political appointments, favors, and how they could make each other look good. This phone call is very damning. He doesn't incriminate himself, Governor J.B. Pritzker, in this phone call, but he suggests that giving the Senate seat to Judy Topinka, a Republican, the Senate seat would make Rod Blagojevich look bipartisan. Translation, do this and it's going to boost your image, Rod. And this is my suggestion to you. And if it boosts your image, maybe one day you'll owe me one. Okay. And here's the real kicker. The two started talking about JB possibly being appointed to treasurer of the state of Illinois. And he didn't ask for it directly. This is where Governor J.B. Pritzker does not incriminate himself. But let's be honest, a billionaire starts, circling a state office during a corruption scandal. It stinks of high heaven to high heaven. It stinks. It's really, really not a good look for Governor J.B. Pritzker. Was it illegal? Maybe not. Was it sleazy? Absolutely. And this guy is serving as the Illinois governor. Okay, nobody knows about this phone call. And I'm trying to explain this because this is why Rod Blagojevich was commuted. He had his sentence commuted by President Donald Trump. President Donald Trump knew that Rod Blagojevich was not the only one having these types of phone calls. Obviously, the now current governor, J.B. Pritzker, was involved in some sort of way in trying to boost each other's images. And Pritzker never offered a bribe directly. He didn't commit a felony on that call. Nothing. He didn't incriminate him. But let's not pretend like this was an innocent chat, okay, between concerned citizens. It was two career Democrats working the levers of power like it was their own monopoly board. And get this, when the recordings were finally made public years later, they were just made public not that long ago. I think it was 2018. So this phone call happened in 2008. So it's been 10 years now. The recordings were finally made public. What did Pritzker do? He played dumb. He denied any wrongdoing in the media. They were completely silent. They shrugged this off. This is a huge phone call. And the same people who screamed over Trump's Ukraine call, okay, which was a perfect phone call, by the way, suddenly quiet. The media quiet about this phone call. And I think it's definitely far more incriminating than what President Donald Trump had with the Ukraine. So it's all a part of a pattern. Governor J.B. Pritzker is the kind of guy who's always been plugged in. He was a big-time Democrat donor, not because he's smart, qualified, but because of his last name and his Hyatt Hotel wallet. And his wallet is bigger than most budgets of counties here in the state of Illinois. He's got he's a billionaire. He's probably the richest politician in the United States. Yeah, at least he was. Donald Trump and he were right up there. And he bought his way into the governor's office. Let me be clear. He dodged accountability on that call. And he got caught, by the way, getting a property tax break by removing toilets from his mansion. And he still became governor. So you're asleep at the wheel if you keep voting for this guy. You and I pay taxes. We have to sit in traffic. We have to live under the rules that these elites don't even pretend to follow. Now, I want to get back to Michael Madigan here in just a second, but it was definitely important that I talk about Governor J.B. Pritzker and that phone call with Rod Blagojevich, because it sets the tone here for what Illinois is like. It's a very corrupt state. And let me be clear, folks, this guy did not come from grassroots, Governor J.B. Pritzker. He didn't fight for working families. He worked the system from the inside with the worst of them, Blagojevich, the Chicago Democrats, these party bosses, as I like to call them. They're like mob bosses. And he's running Illinois like it's his own little petri dish, like a dictator. Okay, he's tyrannical and he's pushing these radical policies. He's crushing small businesses, and he's pretending like he's some sort of moral savior, and he's this moral guy, and he's like, I'm for working families. And then you and I, we're watching our power bills climb up. And I'm going to get to Governor J.B. Pritzker being at this Knox College, and he made a joke about, electric bills going up and how he's a dad and he tells all of his kids to keep the lights off or whatever. It's just like, give me a break. You are not a person of the people. You are an elitist. Stop pretending you're like us. Now, had this phone call happened between Donald Trump Jr., I want to make this very clear, and a Republican governor, this would have been on CNN for 6 months. You probably have never heard about this before. Comment on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook. Leave a comment. Have you heard about the phone call between Rod Blagojevich and Governor J.B. Pritzker, then Democrat donor, and then Governor of Illinois, Rod Blagojevich? Have you heard about this taped phone call by the FBI? Probably just hearing about it right now because the media buried it. They shrugged it off. So we need transparency. We need term limits. We need accountability. And I want to talk about Michael Madigan because he didn't act alone. Okay, this was a systemic racket. ComEd, yes, a utility giant. They paid $200 million fine for essentially bribing politicians to keep the money flowing. This wasn't politics. It was racketeering in suits. So Michael Madigan, he didn't act alone. ComEd, yes, the utility giant, $200 million for essentially bribing these politicians to keep the money flowing, the union contracts. Let's name names. John Hooker, Jay Doherty, Anne Primagori, I'm probably butchering their names. Primagori, they weren't just interns. These were executives and lobbyists, all guilty of selling the people of Illinois out. So these guys, all a part of it. And you pay sky-high utility bills because of them. Michael McLean, that was Michael Madigan's right-hand guy. And he dodged conviction in the Madigan case. He did wind up getting nailed in the ComEd case, the sentencing coming for him July 24th. So the political machine, it does live on. I named all of these names and they're all having sentences. They all paid fines. ComEd, yeah, the $200 million fine. But the political machine still lives on today. And I want to be very clear, just because Madigan's gone from office, his influence still lingers. He chaired the Illinois Democrat Party. He engineered the maps. He raised money, bullied lawmakers, and protected his loyalists. And don't think for a second that his legacy has disappeared with his resignation, okay? Or with this possible sentencing. His legacy still lives on. Illinois politics still runs on the fumes of the Madigan machine. Cronies are still seated. Lobbyists still whisper in ears, like quite literally. They'll whisper in the ears of your lawmakers while they're on the floor debating bills. Like, it's the most wild thing to see. I can't even believe that they have the cojones to do that. And the public, we're paying for all of it. We're paying for all of it. So now I'll give some credit where credit's due. Sarah Stryker, she's the U.S. attorney taking over this public corruption division, and has kept this fire burning. Prosecutors like Diane MacArthur and Julie Schwartz are doing what Illinois Democrats in Springfield won't, which is holding their own accountable. But to be honest with you, I mean, this has been a years-long justice, and they've really been kind of slow walking this thing. I mean, sure, you brought him to kind of to justice, but we don't even know if he's going to be sentenced for the 12 years or not. They're asking for the 12 years, but they're probably going to meet somewhere in the middle. Michael Madigan's lawyers are asking for him to stay at home with a little ankle monitor. So make no mistake, these prosecutors are up against a political class, but they could be much harder. I mean, this was decades of robbing you, the taxpayer, and this was all corruption and taking bribes and making sure the cash was flowing. I mean, he should face way more than 12 years, in my opinion. They should be asking for 20 to life. He should be serving life. I mean, 12 years is life probably for this guy. He's 83. But they traded favors like currency, and what do we do now? We could just complain about it, or we could fight back. We could push for mandatory minimums on public corruption. I think a 20-year minimum on public corruption if you are providing. So a lot of what's going on now, you provide grants to these nonprofits in the state of Illinois. So, for example, there's one nonprofit. It's called the Illinois Coalition for Refugees' Rights or something like that. They've gotten like $63 million in like a 7-month time span from the government. Okay. And then in turn, those nonprofits turn around and donate to Democrat politicians and Democrat causes. Okay. So like this is very, very corrupt. And that's how they keep robbing you. Your money is going to these groups that you don't care about. I mean, that you're not for. So ICER, they specialize in providing legal aid to illegal immigrants to avoid deportation. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to that. But they're doing it so that way they can, one, pay all of their friends. So in these nonprofit organizations, they are executive directors, $250,000 or something like that. That's about what the CEOs and executive presidents all get paid. And, it's all feel good, right? There's 1 billion of these nonprofits with this like moral feel good mission. And they give them grants through the Illinois Department of Human Services. You can look them up, all of the money funneled through these nonprofits. And then in turn, they donate to their campaigns. So they keep getting into office and keep paying them. So now it's not as blatant as like maybe ComEd. They still do it with unions, right? I mean, they're still doing this. We need minimums for public corruption, full transparency in utility contracts or whatever government contracts are going on, whether it's for the roads, construction, maintaining public buildings, whatever it is. We need full transparency in utility contracts. Term limits for state lawmakers. We need to, make sure that there's term limits for our congressmen, that they can't just keep running for reelection and keep getting in. There needs to be term limits, like, hey, you can only run 3-4 times, something like that. We need full prison sentences for corrupt officials, no matter their age, no matter their party, and we need a fair justice system, not a 2-tier justice system where if a Republican were to be doing this, then they would see the max. Okay. Just because Michael Madigan is a Democrat and just because he's an 83-year-old man doesn't mean that he is exempt from justice. All right. So on June 13th, we'll have to see if the judge has backbone to put Illinois' biggest crook behind bars, not for politics, but for justice. Okay, there's got to be justice here, and no more sweetheart deals, no more he's too old for jail excuses. Madigan should go down like the career criminal that he is, disgraced, sentenced, and stripped of his influence. And look, if you agree, share this episode. Call your reps. Tell them, hey, I don't like that you signed off on this vote or that you voted for this nonprofit to get all of this funding. I don't like that you voted for this. And I think that's corruption. And I see that they donated. Look this kind of stuff up. And Michael Madigan, just because he's sentenced, I want to be clear. Illinois politics are broken and they're going to continue to be broken until we fix it and we claw this thing apart piece by piece and we see who's getting paid by who and who's getting paid by your tax dollars. All right. So I got to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat. We're going to be right back talking a little bit more about Illinois and the Democrats coming for your rental properties. So they're going after landlords. And we're going to claw through some of this rhetoric, and we're going to look through what this bill is all about. It's called House Bill 3564, proposed by State Senator Mike Simmons. He's a Democrat of Chicago, of course. I'll be right back. Welcome to Conservative Cat Clips, where the claws come out and the truth is on tap. I love the truth. I'm your host, Cat, and we are cutting through the holy hypocrisy and setting the record straight from the big lie that is pushed by the left. The Bible supports illegal immigration. Oh, really? Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because guess what? We're walking through Scripture, and we're going to provide you some common sense. Now, every time we talk about the border security, some activist grabs the Bible and says, Jesus was a refugee. Okay, sweetie, let's clear this up. Jesus wasn't hopping the fence or dodging border patrol. Okay, his family fled legally under laws of the land. There's a big difference between seeking refuge and violating the country's sovereignty. The Bible is crystal clear about this. God is a God of law and order, and he's just so awesome. Man, I could just jump for Jesus every morning. Not chaos, not loopholes. God is not a God of that. God is a God of order, and everything has a place. Romans 13, 1-2 says, let every person be subject to governing authorities. Whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed. Okay, translation, the nation has immigration laws, okay, and they're not being followed. Smuggling people across the borders, overstaying your visa, and lying to get in, that's not compassion, that's rebellion, okay? And now, yes, the Bible says care for the stranger. Absolutely, but here's the kicker. In ancient Israel, the sojourner or foreigner was expected to obey the laws of the land. Here's Numbers. Numbers 15, verse 16 says, one law shall be for you and for your stranger who sojourns with you. There was one law, one standard. Not, oh, well, they meant well, let them break the rules. Nope, that's not it. There was one law shall be for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you. That's what Numbers 15, verse 16 says. And you are welcomed always, but you have to respect the system. You are welcomed when you respect the system. Okay, so let's talk about Nehemiah, the wall builder himself. He didn't pray away the invasion. He got up and he built the walls of Jerusalem to protect his people, not out of hate, but out of duty to his nation and to God. Tell that to an open borders bishop the next time they scream, build bridges, not walls. Build bridges, not walls. Okay, Nehemiah, he was a wall builder. The Bible also teaches us the importance of national identity, borders, and responsibility, and responsible governance. God divided the nations at Babel, and he assigned lands to tribes, and there was order. Not this open range global free-for-all, which is exactly what the left wants. So now the Bible doesn't bless law breaking just because someone has a sad story. Okay, it demands we show compassion within the boundaries of justice, just kind of like how Jesus and God are. God is a merciful God. God is also a God of justice. Illegal immigration is not mercy. It's disorder, it's deception, it's disrespect for the very nation God entrusted you to protect. Okay, so leftists, listen up. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. I'm Cat. The Bible commands compassion, not chaos. Laws, not loopholes. Justice is demanded. Conservative Cat Show. Not just your feelings. Okay, so let's stop twisting scripture to fit your socialist slogans. Build walls, build bridges, not walls. And let's start reading the truth and the true backbone of this scripture and look at the several examples which show us that illegal immigration is not condoned in the Bible. This has been Conservative Cat Clip. So much. And with me in studio, Dean. How are you? He's not a politician. He's not a lobbyist. He's a hardworking taxpayer, McLean County taxpayer, and he's paying attention. It's the Conservative Cat Show. Thank you so much for being here. And with me in studio, Dean. How are you, Dean? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Kat. It's how have you been since we talked a couple months ago?
Pretty good. We talked a couple months ago about the sales tax referendum. Unfortunately, it passed. And, folks, Dean, he's not a politician. He's not a lobbyist. He's a hard-working taxpayer, McLean County taxpayer, and he's paying attention. And he paid really close attention to the sales tax referendum. Really quick, summarize for our listeners, viewers, what that sales tax referendum was all about.
Yeah, so basically the schools wanted to increase the sales tax in McLean County from 8.75% to 9.75% on most goods and services you purchase, like gasoline, pretty much everything but cars and medicine and groceries, I think. So that did pass by, I think it was like a 53% yes to 47% no countywide. That goes into effect on July 1st, I believe, which is also when the Illinois state gas tax goes up again. So your gas tax will go up once from the Illinois state legislature. Those are built-in increases that Pritzker passed a couple years ago. And then it's going to go up again on July 1st, thanks to the sales tax. So,
And they're baked in the cake where I think it was in 2019 they voted to double it. And then since 2019, it just keeps increasing and increasing the gas tax. But the sales tax, for the math folks, if you buy a $5 cup of coffee at Starbucks, it's 5 extra cents and it goes directly to the schools. But today we're talking about property taxes, and you're just a citizen who believes in accountability, right, Dean?
Yeah. I'd just like to see our money spent well and to get good results for the amount of taxes that we're paying.
Right.
Which I don't think is the case right now and hasn't been for a long time.
So I wanted to have you on the show today because you had posted something on social media that, made me kind of chuckle and grin. There's this big issue with Olympia School District and Ridgeview. I reached out to the county clerk's office. They did take responsibility for that because that was an apparent error. Up until now, I got that confirmation from the county clerk's office. They did say that, yes, we are the ones who are responsible for the filed levies and the calculating error for these tax rates. So they have taken some steps, and I'll just share with you, Dean, before we get into today's show and just your take on it, what the county clerk shared with me. The county performed extensive due diligence with our software provider and arranged for a correction to be performed this year as allowed by Illinois statute. So they're going to correct it this year. So they're going to send updated property tax bills to you if you're in the Olympia School District and if you're in the Ridgeview School District. The county clerk has re-extended the Olympia and Ridgeview payments, obviously, so you're not going to miss they've extended that deadline to file your property taxes, right? And to turn in your property taxes. The additional tax has been added for the second installment of the affected parcels for this year. Certified letters were mailed by the treasurer to the affected taxpayers on June 4th. Corrected bills will be mailed by the treasurer later next week. So this week sometime the next week. So the week starting June 9th, they should be getting them that week. And then the taxpayers who are in these two school districts have an additional 30 days to pay that second installment without penalty. So it's like a second installment that they're going to have to pay. Mm-hmm. So that is the update, because ultimately they sent out bills that were not as expensive as expected for these taxpayers. And you made a comment, God works in mysterious ways. Can you expand on that comment, why you made that comment? I think it was genius.
Oh, yeah, it's just a blessing from the Lord that they didn't have to pay, potentially didn't have to pay that sales tax the property tax increase as quickly as they otherwise would have. I think some discussion was, they just have to pay the difference on top of their property tax next year, but the school districts whined and bemoaned their the lack of increased income they'd be getting coming, I think in July is when they get that first payment from the county. So the taxpayers are going to pay it anyways, but they got a momentary reprieve, which is a blessing of sorts, and all good things come from the Lord. So
Well, and the God is kind of funny. I think he's a pretty humorous God, and I think that he wanted to make him sweat a little bit, where, hey, your whole school funding plan hinges on squeezing just a few drops out of these property owners. Really, at the end of the day, because I think it was 1.5 million that they were missing.
Yep.
Olympia, anyway, if they didn't get this, but it sounds like they're going to wind up getting it. But can you talk a little bit about that, where the school, they obviously wanted this 1.5 million. Is there a concern that without it, they were outraged by it. They seemed a little frustrated that they made this calculation error, the county, the miscalculation. So it's kind of nerve-wracking that these schools rely on that so heavily, right? I mean, 1.5 million, it's a lot, but it's also like just a few extra drops. What if the referendum didn't pass? I guess they really, really needed that to pass.
Yeah, so the school boards, like, they pass the budget and the tax levy for like the following year, usually at the same meeting, typically like in the December meeting. So they've already made their hiring decisions and their salary adjustments and all that kind of stuff, and all their contracts based off of what they anticipate getting from the tax levy increase. And I think Olympia actually, they also had a referendum to increase the property tax rate.
Yeah, that was in March of 2024, which was
okay. Yeah, so that was I think a lot of this increase was missing. So that's what this is specifically for. So they probably have already taken out bonds, I assume, as well. So there's some potential debt obligations there. I mean, I can empathize with them from the regard if they planned on this money being there and the voters foolishly approved the rate hikes on themselves. So I can see why their financial officer might be frustrated with that, and they might scramble a little bit. But I actually took a look at some of their district-wide statistics for Olympia, and since 2019, their enrollment has dropped about 7%. They've lost their enrollment's down over 100 students, which is about what Unit 5 is about 6% over the same time period, and District 87 is down 15% over the same time period. But their expenditures since 2019 have increased, I think it was 42%. So they have 6% less students, and they are spending 42% money, 42% more of your taxpayer dollars annually. It increased from like 24 million to, I want to say it was 34 million. And that was through the end of 2024. I don't know off the top of my head their 2025 school year budget. So they already have a massive increase in spending. That's even before they get this sales tax money. That's even before they get this higher revenue from the increased sales tax, increased property tax rates that they passed last year, and also from like the extra bond revenue for their building projects. So they're just spending out the wazoo, and they're spending all this more money for less and less students. So it seems a little foolish, and just bad planning and bad organizational management. If the amount of services you're providing is going down, but your costs are ever increasing.
Yeah, well, I don't know, this error, right? It was McLean County Clerk's Office had done this miscalculation. I say let it stand and let them sweat a little bit, right? Because then they'd have to live within their means, right? You and I have to do it, and I get it. I can sympathize as well with the financial, the people who are working there at Olympia. They were planning on this money being there, wasn't there, but they should be really in a financial situation to plan for this kind of thing to happen. I mean, it's really a hinge. Like, we're dealing with little tiny miscalculations here. If they don't get that referendum money that they passed in 2024, then the whole thing is just going to implode. Like that's what I was taking from these school districts. It's like, man, I really wish that our schools were in a financially sound place, and maybe cut some of the administrative bloat to where the whole plan isn't just hinging on this 1.5 or whatever it is on these referendums that it seemed to bring like multiple times a year. Just recently we talked about the sales tax. Prior to that, it was the yes for Unit 5. It seems like every year there's a referendum, and it seems like they're kind of flying by the seam of their pants here, banking on these referendums and then banking on nothing to go wrong with the county clerk's office and calculating and making sure that they get that money. It seems like, I don't know. It's like they don't have any kind of emergency funds, nothing.
Yeah. So I actually I just asked Grok to do a deep search for me. And Grok says that at the end of last school year, they had an ending fund balance of $10 million. So I don't know if that is the equivalent of what their like rainy day fund is in their checking accounts.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like they did have, at least a year ago, a significant amount of
Rainy day
money. Yeah. And then they would get, I think they get I don't know all the timing of the payments they get from the county from the property tax, but I assume they get it in two things since all the property tax payers have to do that, make those twice payments in June and then in September, early September. So they probably had a large rainy day fund of an ending balance of at least a couple $1 million that probably could have covered this. And also they start getting the sales tax revenue. I think they're projecting to get it in like October. So they were already getting more money in that they didn't know if they were going to get it or not, right? Because April 1st, that's when it got approved. And when they made the budget last year, they didn't make it with the sales tax taken into account because they had no idea if it was going to pass. So they were getting extra money. And I think if it is true that there is a legal ability, the state law allows for the county to reissue those property tax bills. That's probably why they pushed so hard. I'm sure there were some lawyers talking back and forth. I'm sure the pristine Olympia High School social studies teacher and Bloomington City Council member Cody, his last name escapes me. I can't think of it now.
Hendricks, yeah.
Yeah, Hendricks. Yeah, there we go. I'm sure he called in some favors as well, put some pressure on there since he's a teacher in that school district to get that revision made. You never know, but
it's possible. Yeah, and I don't know the PR. Because people are going to be getting higher property tax bills than the previous one because this is their second installment. They're going to say, whoa, it's higher. And that's not what I was expecting. And I don't know. Somebody's going to be looking for someone to blame. And it seems like it's all fallen on the McLean County Clerk's office. Yes, there is a miscalculation there. But like you said, they had this rainy day fund, it seems. I don't know. I didn't grok that, but it seems like they might have had this. And the sales tax referendum, which was money that they weren't really banking on having. And now they have it because they could get it as soon as October because Olympia's in that. That was for McLean County schools district-wide, or like for all McLean County schools in the county. So Olympia's in there. And I mean, it's like, why not use that? Why not use what you had left over, the $10 million? Instead of like griping about this 1.5. It just seems like pinching pennies, and it's either really nerve-wracking or really greedy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, whoa, they're really pushing for this, and like they need it. That's what they're claiming and expressing, the school officials. And it's like, do you though? And if you don't, I mean, is this just utter greed then? And feel entitled to it?
Yeah, I was actually just looking up also. So I know that the new Illinois state budget, it increased educational spending for their like equity-based equalizer, evidence-based funding formula. It increased at $307 million above what it was allocated last year, and the schools across the state were expecting $350 million. So they're probably a little panicked because they're getting maybe slightly less money from the state of Illinois. And then Olympia gets, in fiscal year 2023, they got $3 million from the federal government. So potentially they're worried about reductions in grants and spending from the Department of Education. Maybe Olympia's got some crazy racist DEI program that they're worried that Linda McMahon's going to find and threaten to pull their federal funding. So I think there's also some revenue worries they have, not just from the local property taxes, but also from the state and the the federal level as well, which is probably why they pushed so hard to get this revised tax bill sent out this year.
Well, there you have it. Well, Dean, that was pretty much all I wanted. Anything else you'd like to add? I mean, why are you concerned about these issues with the schools and the taxation? And why should our listeners and readers and viewers be concerned?
It's always more money. And it's more and more money they're taking out of your pocket, whether it's at the county property tax level, whether it's at a sales tax level, whether it's at the state level, whether it's at the federal level. We're all paying those taxes to multiple levels of government. And from the property taxes, 2/3 of that is going to the schools, and they are educating less students. They have lower test scores, and they keep on asking for more money. And they're going to keep on asking for more money and doing these proposals and these referendums because so far no one's actually put their foot down and said no. And the voters seem fine with getting worse results for fewer students at a drastically increased cost. So
I don't know if I want to get into this, but we'll try, and I'll see what you think. So why do you think voters, and I've said this before on the program, I think some voters might feel guilty that they're sending their kids to public school, and because they're gone for 8 hours a day, and it's not for free, but I feel like in the average voter's mind, you're like, public education is not something I pay tuition for out of pocket, thousands of dollars in a tuition, so I feel obligated or almost a guilt to provide as much, or to say yes every single time the schools ask. And the schools are in a position where they can ask, and it's like, do you tell them no because they've got your kids for 8 hours a day, right? And they're in a position where they know they can keep asking, and they're at a higher leverage point, or they're in at the negotiating table in a better place because they're with your kids for 8 hours a day. And are you willing to pull them out? And I don't know if you want to go there, but I was just wondering, why are the voters never, like Unit 5, yes for Unit 5, that was a couple of years ago. The sales tax referendum got through. Obviously, the 2024 Olympia referendum got through. A lot of these referendums are constantly approved. Now, I do want to do full disclosure. There was a time where the yes for Unit 5 tax, they tried to put that during a general election, not a consolidated election.
Mm-hmm.
And the voters did vote that down in the general. Now, they do try to introduce these referendums. So March 2024, that's Olympia's. The sales tax, they got smart with the Unit 5 one, and they introduced that one during the consolidated elections. So a lot of people are asleep at the wheel during that time. You just came off, a general election, and most people, the voter turnout for those are traditionally lower. So there was one vote with the Unit 5 one where the voters did shut it down before they brought it back and brought it to referendum in the municipal election of 2025.
Yeah.
Or of 2020, I forget the year. I think it was 2024. The yes for Unit 5. No, 2023, something like that.
22 was the general election where it lost like a 2-1 margin, and then it won barely in April of 23.
Okay.
So
why do you think voters are saying yes to some of these referendums? Or I would say more so than not, right?
Well, it's a minority of voters in reality, like of the registered voters, right? So in the November election we just had with Trump versus Harris, there was, I think, over 70% voter turnout in McLean County, versus this when the sales tax referendum passed on April 1st of this year, it was, I think, 30%, which is actually pretty high historically for the off election cycle consolidated election. They just don't go out and vote. And I think I saw some statistic from the McLean County Republicans that 15,000 voters who pulled Republican primary ballots a year ago for the general to vote for the primary, to essentially vote for Donald Trump in the primary, they did not vote in this most recent election. So it's just voter turnout, right? And these are like people that pulled Republican ballots they probably pulled them before the political parties have all this voter data on. If you pulled a ballot, they can't tell who you voted for, but if you pulled a ballot, Republican primary ballot, you're most likely a Republican voter. So there's just a lot of people that are Republicans that have specifically asked for Republican ballots before, and they don't come out and vote in the primaries. And then stuff like this happens when you have voter turnout that's 2 or 3 times lower than the general election. And the thing is, the state, the local elections, that impacts you the most directly. That impacts your quality of life. That impacts the highest dollar amount for most people of their taxes is from the local taxes, between sales tax and the property taxes. That's the vast majority of taxes that the middle class and the lower class are paying in McLean County. So they don't really seem to want to vote with their wallet, or they make that disconnect, or there's something there. But I think a lot of it is you just have to get people motivated to go out and vote. That usually requires a lot of precinct committeemen to help go out and knock on doors and stuff like that. I know the McLean County Republicans, they have like 140 precinct committeeman slots, but only about 20 to 25 of them are actually filled right now. So if you're kind of sick and tired of these sales tax hikes, these property tax hikes, if you don't like that the Bloomington City Council flipped to a 5-member majority for the progressives, if you don't like that the McLean County Board flipped Democrat majority for the first time in history in 2024, go be a precinct committeeman. Go and talk to your neighbors. Talk about local politics too. I think local is where really have to focus to get people to actually come out and vote, and you can reach across the aisle more easily on local elections. So personal advice is don't make everything about Trump. If it's about sales tax for your county, I don't know, maybe don't talk about Trump, and don't wear your Trump 47 hat that you got from the Charlie Kirk rally at ISU campus. So
Exactly.
That's practical good advice. I mean, you can like Trump, but you don't have to talk about him. And so just kind of reach your neighbors where they're at, because the reality is Trump lost in McLean County. For the average McLean County voter, with 70% of the voters out there, he isn't the winning ticket item, and that's just a political reality. So for those local elections, maybe keep it local, I think, is probably the best approach and recommendation I would have.
Yeah. You can't argue there. And then I'm saying local elections are so important, and you're so right with this low voter turnout, and they've caught on, your elected officials have caught on that, hey, let's put things on referendum and get things passed via the municipal election, because there's less voters. Mm-hmm. And that we need to address that, I think, as a community, really, and get out the vote. So that brings us to the end of our time. Dean, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep. Thanks, Kat. Have a great weekend.
Okay. Good morning, folks. You're listening to Conservative Cat, so do appreciate you being here. Real quick, I am going to get to the Fee-lony. Mike Simmons, he's a Democrat out of Chicago. They're handcuffing landlords, small landlords again. They want to push small landlords out, and they want government landlords to come in, or at least BlackRock or these big corporations to come in, who in turn, donate to things like the Tides Foundation, which Governor J.B. Pritzker's family is tied to. We're going to get to that here in just a second. But Olympia schools, this year, they increased their tax levy by a whopping 8.85%. 8.85%. That's an increase. And families across the state are struggling with inflation, higher costs. We're struggling at the pump because of the state's gas taxes forever increasing. There were Republicans, even Dan Brady, your current Bloomington mayor, voted for that gas tax hike in 2019, something like that, voted to double the gas tax. So Olympia decides to stick it to the taxpayers. They increase their property tax levy. And let me be clear, this wasn't because that was something necessary, like they needed more educational services or they needed more teachers or anything like that. No. This was, and I'm going to be very plain here, this referendum that passed in 2024, March of 2024, which is why they need the $1.5 million. That's what would have been generated from that referendum. And due to a calculating error, they didn't get it this year, but they're going to get it in the second installment. They're going to send out updated property tax bills, McLean County Clerk's office. Now, this was not about educational services, more teachers in the classroom. No. Really what this was, it was an effort to not decrease your taxes. Now think about that for a second. This referendum, March 2024, was basically a vote to keep taxes where they were, to make sure that the tax rate didn't decrease even after a special bond rate had expired. Okay, so it was a special bond rate, it expired. That's why there was an elevated tax rate, and they didn't want that elevated tax rate to go down despite paying off this loan. So this bond, and it wasn't about improving the school. It was really just so that way your local school district didn't have to lose any kind of cash flow that they were accustomed to. And really, at the end of the day, I think it's the pensions, the unfunded pension liability, $143.7 billion is what we're at. They want to secure their pensions, and that's why they keep passing these referendums. In this situation, it's not just Olympia, okay? This is nothing new. This was a pattern. I've seen this before. Unit 5 did the same thing. 2022, they put it on the general, and then it passed in 2023, the municipal election, like we talked about with Dean. The school district asked the voters to raise the base tax rate to avoid a tax rate decrease. Okay, even though the bonds were paid off and it was supposed to decrease that rate, that means essentially you were told, hey, I know the bonds are done, but the tax rate shouldn't go down. We want to keep it high. In other words, no tax relief for you, taxpayer. We want to keep things comfortable for us and for our budget, even though you hardworking people, you're footing the bill. And this isn't just a minor inconvenience, folks. This is a kind of tax hike that is hurting working families in your community in Central Illinois. The school districts all around are doing this, and they just passed another sales tax hike this last municipal election for all McLean County schools. And, folks are already trying to make ends meet, and they're struggling to pay their bills. And these bureaucrats don't live in the real world. They live in a world where a tax hike is just another day at the office. Meanwhile, the rest of us, we're tightening our belts, we're making sacrifices, and you see that tax bill come in and you feel that pinch in your pocketbook, and you ask yourself, who's really benefiting from these tax increases? Here's the thing, folks. School boards, local governments, they don't get to keep raising these taxes without answering for it. It's time we hold them accountable. I get it. We passed the referendums. It's done and over with. But we need to hold them accountable. Hey, what are you doing to improve the school? What are you doing? Are we going to see the reading rates go up? Are we going to see the kids do better at math? We need real improvements. What do you have to show for it? It's time we change, okay? And how we approach funding schools. They need to actually work with the money we give them, okay? They need to be held responsible. We need transparency. We need fiscal responsibility. And more importantly, we need our money to be spent wisely and to make actual improvements in these places. All right, let me get to this bill, House Bill 3564. Write that down with a green crayon if you have to. House Bill 3564, led by State Senator Mike Simmons, Democrat out of Chicago, of course. And they want to limit what landlords can charge as far as move-in fees go. I've paid a few move-in fees in my lifetime, okay? This is obviously not a bill to crack down on squatters and to improve your property rights. No, this bill says move-in fees can't be more than 20% of 1 month's rent. Okay, so, and by the way, if the tenant wants to pay it in installments, you have to let them pay this move-in fee in installments, and you can't charge interest. You can't charge late fees for the installment plan, nothing like that. So, landlords, you've got to pick your poison. Charge a move-in fee or a security deposit. You can't charge both nowadays. Okay, so with this bill, 3564, did you write that down with your green crayon? It might sound fair. It's not. It's socialism. It's socialism. It's like lipstick on a pig. Okay, it's socialism. And they put some lipstick on a pig, which is socialism, okay? And this really kneecaps landlords, mom and pop owners who rent out duplexes, or they rent out a 4-flat to stay afloat. These aren't big corporations that this is going to affect. Democrats say that this is all about helping renters. Really what this is about, it's helping these big corporate-y type landlords, and ultimately these big corporate type landlords like BlackRock, they're going to come in and they're going to do government contracts. And what we're going to have is no longer a free market private industry where people do real estate privately. We're going to have government owned and operated, corporate contracted landlords come in, and they are going to do all of the property do all of the real estate here in the state. That's really what this is all about. These are working class people who are investing in properties, trying to survive these sky high property taxes that we have here in the state of Illinois, endless regulation, and tenants who game the system. And, they're capping their fees. They're saying, hey, you can't charge a move-in fee that's, over 20% of the rent. And you can't charge a security deposit and a move-in fee. You can only do one. And, forget about charging a security deposit to cover damages or back rent or anything like that. It's not protecting renters. This is pushing landlords out of the state altogether, and it's by design. Okay, so Matt Murphy from the Chicago Land Apartment Association said it best. We want to treat when we treat our landlords like predators, when we tell them how to operate their businesses, we're basically saying, get out of Illinois. This is what he said in the Center Square. He's quoted. And guess what? They're listening. They're seeing all of this come down, these house bills come down, and the landlords are selling off their properties. Investors are running. And the people left holding the bag, the middle-class renters, okay, who often face fewer options, higher rent, worse maintenance. So they're creating the problem, but guess what? They're going to come up with a solution. And the solution is corporate type landlords come in, and they're going to sign government contracts, and it's going to be government housing. Okay, that's what they want at the end of the day. They want to create the problem, and they want to be the solution to your problem. So none of this matters to people like Christina Castro. She's also a senator who straight up scolded realtors for daring to ask for more time to negotiate, by the way, this bill. Quote, you will work with Senator Simmons on this bill. Okay, these realtors, these people who have these properties. Oh, really, Senator Castro? Since when did we live in a monarchy and private professionals were commanded to fall in line with these party politicians, with the Democrats, and work with Democrats in a bill that's going to hurt them? We know what you're doing. You're pushing out these small landlords. The gig's up. I know what you're doing. You're not even being quiet about it anymore. You're shoving these landlords out of the state so that way you can come in and be the solution with your government housing and award government contracts, possibly to BlackRock, who is in the pocket of Governor J.B. Pritzker's family. They donate to the Tides Foundation, George Soros Pritzker-backed foundation. I mean, come on. The writing's on the wall here. You're not pulling the wool over my eyes. My friends, Illinois is already one of the worst states for landlords. It's the least landlord-friendly state in the entire country. I'd make that argument. And it's the least friendly because we've got the highest property taxes in the nation, if not the second highest property taxes in the nation. And between the eviction moratoriums, like you can't evict anybody anymore. So this renter can be a complete jackwagon. You can't evict them, and they're, back on rent, and you're not collecting rent. You can't. They've got rent control. They've got high property taxes. No wonder people are selling their properties and moving to Indiana, Iowa, Tennessee. We lost 2 congressional seats. California lost 4. It's insanity. Even Senator Sue Rezin, she's a Republican. Not my favorite Republican in the state house, but she's got a backbone here. And she said the quiet part out loud that these policies tell people don't invest in Illinois. And she's right. These people are not investing in Illinois. And it's all by design. It's on purpose. They want to force these landlords out of the state. Then what's going to wind up happening is there's high rent. And then this is a problem. Housing is a problem. And then they're going to come in with their solution. It's playbook. They do this all the time. We're going to get to a couple of other industries outside of this real estate industry. We're going to look at the payment processors. They're forcing these payment processors out of the state with the bill. They're also forcing insurers out of the state with the bill. California did the same thing. They forced insurers out, a State Farm out, and then there was no insurance for people who lost their homes in the LA fires. We are going to get to the LA riots, by the way, going on. People flying Mexican flags, but really the crux of the issue is our public school system, and we're raising activists. I actually attended the Normal West graduation, and I saw this girl. She got up there and she took a Mexican flag and just waved it like crazy up there on the graduation stage. You know, when I went to school, you were banned from doing that sort of stuff. We couldn't throw our caps, nothing. And like these kids acted like complete animals. I don't understand. Like one of them fell on purpose, did the worm when he was walking across the stage. One of the girls, I forget where it was at, they did a backflip on the stage and kicked a girl in the face. Like these kids are just taught to be activists, and they have no discipline in these places. So this girl, she's waving the Mexican flag. Guess what? She's going to probably wind up voting for politicians like Governor Gavin Newsom, who spit all over the state's or this country's sovereignty and allow illegal immigrants into the country. And they're going to fly their Mexican flags and light cop cars on fire. All right, I deviated from the plan a little bit, but they want to micromanage everything in this rental agreement. That's what Springfield is doing with landlords, and they want to tell entrepreneurs and property owners that you are not welcome here, and they're doing it on purpose because guess what? They're going to come in and they're going to come up with government housing for everybody, and they're going to be the solution to everybody's problem. So what happens when you drive landlords out of business? Fewer rental units, higher prices, less maintenance, more tenant complaints, and guess what Democrats do? They blame landlords for it all. So they're creating the problem, and it's a rigged game. It's backwards economics, and it hurts people they claim that they want to protect. It's all about a problem, and hey, Big Daddy government's going to come in, and we are going to be your solution. So we've got to stop pretending that this is about a $200 move-in fee, and this is really about power. Okay, you don't want to help the tenants. This is not about the $200 move-in fee. This is about government housing. They're going to come in and they're going to contract with a big corporation like BlackRock, and they're going to come in and provide the housing, and they're the ones who are going to be in charge, and they have the power to strip you from your home in the dead of night because they're the government, and they're going to come in and they're stripping people of their property rights, and they have the power to force you into government-managed relationships with tenants. And they want to have the relationship with the tenant, and they want you to own nothing and to be happy. They don't want landlords to own anything. They don't want you to own anything. They want to own it all, and they want to house you, and they want to provide you a government service that's monitored, controlled, rationed, and they want to do it all themselves. And I find this hilarious. The DMV. Just look at the DMV. You want? Sure, fine, go ahead. Get your government housing, have your government health care. I don't give a damn. I'll move out of the state. I'm done. Look at the DMV. You can't go to the DMV anymore. You got to have all kinds of appointments. You show up for your appointment. They say we're too busy. They turn you away. I mean, anymore, you got to have come in hand with your umbilical cord and your Starbucks receipt from that morning and say, hey, this is my whole life. Is my umbilical cord enough for you in order to renew my license? They can't even fix the DMV. What the hell makes you think that you can pull this off and provide housing for everybody in this state? I'd be joking me. And I've said it before, Illinois, they don't have a housing crisis. It has a freedom crisis. You've got state lawmakers in there pushing landlords out so they can come in and be the superhero and provide you government housing. And landlords, they aren't the enemy. Private property is the backbone of a free society. Okay, if a landlord wants to charge a reasonable move-in fee to protect their investment, that should be allowed. And that's not predatory. It's called responsible. Move-in fees, security deposits, you're protecting an asset. And if you really want tenants to be in places that they love, then we need private property. You need private property. You need to cut the red tape for these landlords. But this is radical Springfield. And they want to treat like everything is a social justice contract. Okay. And they've made the landlords the enemy. And they'll scold you like a child. Like Senator Castro, you will work with the party on this, realtors. You're going to work on this. If you object, they'll scold you like a child, and they're going to force you into this. So here's my message. Don't back down. Don't sell out. If you're a landlord trying to make it in the state, thank you. We've got your back. I've got your back. And I'm going to keep calling out this nonsense till common sense comes home. We need common sense here in our home in Illinois. All right. So Conservative Cat Show, go to patriotpumpenergy.com. Use promo code ConservativeCat. Support the show. That's how you do it. You buy your bottle of Patriot Pump Energy. It's a great supplement. It keeps you focused all day long, and there's not a ton of caffeine in it. And I drink it every single day. Just keeps me going, keeps me focused. So, Conservative Cat Show, we're going to cut through the noise here. I do want to talk about swipe fee bans, staying with this theme here, where they want to eliminate the free market and usher in a government-controlled, like, they want to control your housing. They want to control your insurance. They also want to, and I'm not kidding you, with these swipe fee bans, I think what they want to do, they want to create their own government payment processing plan, okay, or infrastructure. I think that's what they want to do with this. So last week we talked about these swipe fee bans, and I found myself, and we talked about the insurers, because the insurers, they're telling the insurers that they can't really base their rates off of risk anymore, and convicted felons, you can't raise the rates on convicted felons, although it's not really that they're a convicted felon, it's just that likelihood that they're going to die. These gangbangers, people who are convicted of drug felonies, you're going to die likely, statistically speaking, you're going to die sooner than that of a law-abiding citizen, and we have to account for that. Okay, and that's what the insurers do at this point. And I found myself arguing for MasterCard, Visa, and State Farm, which is wild to me. But what is worse, like, there's two evils, and you got to pick which evil you'd rather have. Are we going to stay free? Are we going to stay private? Or do you want the government to be ushered in and take over these services that these private companies currently provide? Okay, so Springfield is constantly taking swings at the free market. And in case you missed last week's show, I'm going to give you just a quick rundown. House Bill 2425, grab a green pen if you have to, write that down, bans life insurance companies from charging higher rates or denying coverage to people solely because they were convicted felons. Let me be clear, the bill does not discriminate based on race or age, gender, or even really your conviction. The way they calculate rates, they don't know that, like, what your felony conviction is or anything like that. You're assigned like a letter and a number, and they do this statistically with actuarial science. And there's already a law out there that says you can't discriminate based on age, race, gender, all of that. So that's already law. And this is about felons. And really, at the end of the day, felons, at first glance, you're like, okay, well, everybody deserves a second chance. Why are they being punished? We all believe in redemption. Okay. I want to be very clear. And this bill is not about fairness, though. This is about financial fantasy land. And this bill tells a private insurance company, hey, you can't price for risk or based on risk anymore. That's what this bill does. And you can't adjust your rates based on criminal behavior or past criminal behavior. And although that behavior impacts actuarial risk, I want to be clear, this is all about risk, and they calculate the risk based off risk. I'm not saying that I love these companies. I'm not paid by State Farm, not sponsoring them, not trying to advocate for them. I can't stand, they are not a good neighbor. Look what they did in LA. They left, but California made them leave. And that's why people didn't have insurance when their homes burned down in the LA wildfires, which was all a government issue in and of itself, where they could have totally prevented that tragedy. But here's how insurance works, folks. It's risk pooling. Insurers set premiums based on the likelihood that a person will need a payout. They base it off of that, and they use data and statistics and logic. Okay. And when somebody has a felony record, especially violent gang-related ones, statistically, they are a higher risk of an early death. Okay. And this is all about life insurance, by the way. And that's just actuarial math. That's not moral judgment. I believe in second chances, but it's just math. Okay. So House Bill 2425, insurers have to pretend like that doesn't exist. That reality doesn't exist. And they can't say, oh, well, you're a liability and we have to charge you higher for that because you're a liability. They can't say that anymore. And what does that mean? It means you, the law-abiding, hardworking customer, you're going to have to pay more to cover the state-mandated discount for convicted criminals. That's ultimately what this means. And what it really means is you're going to drive insurers out of Illinois. So State Senator Jason Palmer, he nailed it. He said the bill puts insurance companies in a weird spot and you could force them out of the market. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it kind of does, Kat. You were just talking about this when it came to the landlords. Why do they want to force out the landlords? Why do they want to force out the insurance companies? Oh, it's probably because they're trying to step in with government insurance. It's probably because they're trying to step in with government housing. They're trying to force out the private sector. Why? Because these are losers in the public sector who were the fat kids in the corner at the lunch table, and they like dreamed up, oh, we're going to be revenge of the nerds, and we're going to take everything away from all of the cool kids who actually made something out of their lives, and they create something and they charge, and there's an exchange of currency because you have a product that somebody wants. Okay. And they're mad about that because guess what? These people are losers who have never made anything in the public sector, and they provide crappy services. Just go to the DMV and you'll know what I'm talking about. These people don't make anything. They don't make your life easier. There's private companies who make your life easier, and they can't stand that. So it's really revenge of the nerds. All right. So the insurers, they're not allowed to adjust based off of basic risk, convicted felons. Why would they do business here if they're not allowed to calculate their own rates? They're not going to do business here. Who would stay in a state that micromanages your pricing model? Nobody's going to stay. They're not going to stay. You wouldn't. We wouldn't do business here. Thousands of businesses have picked up and left Illinois. They're leaving. Nobody wants to talk about this. They're forcing businesses out because they can't stand the private sector model. This is what the bill is designed to do. It's intentional. Okay. It's slowly bleeding the private industry. Just insert said industry. It could be insurance, could be the real estate industry, it could be whatever. And your state rep says, well, nobody else is going to cover you, so let me provide you government life insurance. And we all know what that looks like. It's going to be bloated. It's going to be inefficient. It's going to be subsidized by the taxpayers, and it's going to be full of fraud. So let's not kid ourselves. Far left Illinois. They hate the markets. They hate the free market. They want socialism. And it's so clear. They don't believe in private business. They want a world where the government is the provider of everything: housing, education, healthcare, and now even life insurance. And it's not because they think that they can offer you a better product. They know that they can't offer you a better product. They want to sit on their butts while you pay for them to sit on their butts. That's what it is. They want to regulate the competition out of it, and they want to regulate you so much into extinction. This bill is just another backdoor for single payer style control of yet another industry. So this is just another one of those control things where they oust an industry. So I want to get to this. This is going on again. Well, before I get off that, it's a Trojan horse. House Bill 2425. Write that down with a green crayon if you have to. It's about control. It's about less consumer choice. It punishes responsible, law-abiding citizens, and it coddles criminals, and it forces the insurers out of the state, leaving only one player left. Okay, single player. This is what I was talking about earlier. Single player. This is all about single player control. Okay, they want, in video games, there's two players. They want to eliminate the other player. They just want to take the remote control or the video game control, and they want to do it all themselves. And this is single player control of yet another industry. This is a Trojan horse, and there's only one single player left on the field, and it's big government. And that is really, really dangerous. And that's why we got to keep calling it out. Now, it's not like just the insurance industry, and I want to keep with this theme this morning. They're taking aim at the payment processing industry. Can't believe I'm arguing for MasterCard, State Farm, and Visa this morning, but this is a big mistake. They are trying to ban swipe fees. And I think that the bigger plan is to push out this payment processors, MasterCard, Visa, who collect modest fee. Let's be real here. It's 1 to 3% from merchants for payment processing, which is kind of a big deal. And look, if you don't like the fees, guess what? I know of plenty diners. There's a little diner here, Mama's, in Lincoln, Illinois. Love Mama's. It's really good. But they just do cash because they don't want to deal with the payment processing. They don't want to deal with Square or anything like that. They just do the cash, right? And there's plenty of businesses that do that. If you don't like the fees, that go to MasterCard, Visa, whatever, to payment processors, then just don't have payment process. Just do cash. That's fine. So we're talking about here this morning the so-called Interchange Fee Prohibition Act. Okay, so my claws are coming out. Let's look at the official spin on this. Okay, the official spin is that this law is going to ban credit card companies from charging interchange fees. Interchange fees, it's a percentage that goes towards the processor that the merchants have to pay. This is a percentage for the processor every time you swipe your card because they process the payment. Okay, so they charge a fee in order to do that. Now, what they're trying to do with this interchange fee is that you can't swipe your card and then also pay or calculate that percentage that your paid payment processor on the taxes and tips. It's kind of complicated. It's a little simple where they just want to take the taxes and tips out of the total and they don't want the merchants to have to pay the percentage on the taxes and tips. It's not simple. This is a direct attack on payment processing and how it works. And the Illinois lawmakers know this. They know this, and this bill's implementation has now been delayed for about a year while there's a federal court challenge to this because it appears to be in violation of the National Bank Act. The Office of the Comptroller of Currency said that the federal bank, this is the federal bank regulator, by the way, they said that this law was ill-conceived, highly unusual, and likely will increase fraud risk, limit consumer services, and destroy public trust. That's what the Office of the Comptroller of Currency said. Now, let me spell this out very plainly. Interchange fees pay for the encryption, fraud protection, and transaction security. Okay, so this little fee, and honestly, I know it sucks for merchants to have to pay that, but like I said, there's an option. Don't use card payment. Don't swipe. Just use cash. Okay, there's plenty of businesses out there like that. Now that limits who will be coming to through your doors, right? So the modest fee, which is like 1 to 3%, I think, on the whole transaction with taxes and tip included. It's a modest fee. It really is because they're processing your payments and they are making sure that there's an encryption for that card number, that there's fraud protection, transaction security. So this is a very involved process, and you're essentially through the fee paying for that process to take place. So when you take that revenue away from banks and payment processing companies, they can't operate safely and profitably. So that's the big one here. They're not going to be able to operate profitably here in the state of Illinois. So guess what? They're going to leave. So why would Illinois do this? Because they want to take over the role of the processor. It's very clear what they're trying to do, and you're not pulling the wool over my eyes. That's right. First, they break the private sector's legs. Okay, and then they say, "Look, you're limping. Let the government come in and take over and carry you." Okay, so this is going to create chaos. They create the problem and they step in and they say, "I'm your solution." This is going to create chaos. It's going to be really bad. You could wind up with fraud. You could wind up with your card not being encrypted for processing payment on the tips and the tips and taxes. You could wind up seeing consumers cards be out there for the taking. So Visa and MasterCard and small processors like Square and Stripe, they're starting to pull out of Illinois. They're going to start pulling out of Illinois because it's too risky. It's too costly to do the business here. And they're not, main thing is that it's not profitable. Okay. They're going to go where the money is. And watch how fast a new shiny state-run system will pop up. It will pop up like that. And they're going to say it's about fairness. It's about equity. This is the public alternative. I can see it right now. I know what you're doing. And guess who lobbied hard for this? It wasn't mom and pop shops, because mom and pop shops, they don't care. This is going to hurt them in the end, because guess what? Who can eat this? It's your big box stores like Walmart, Illinois Retail Merchants Association. They lobbied hard for this bill. And, the corporate giants, Walmart, they have their own infrastructure in order to abide by this law. Mom and pop shops, they don't. Small retailers, they're just scraping by, okay, with inflation and this economy. They're just scraping by. So they're not going to be able to implement the infrastructure to abide by this law. So who takes the fall? It's your local shops. It's consumers like you, because guess what? Local shop shuts down because they can't install this infrastructure. It's too costly for them. It puts them under, and you can't go to Mama's anymore, or you can't go to a small little diner anymore because they can't comply with this law. So Ben Jackson from the Illinois Bankers Association hit the nail on the head when he was quoted in Center Square. He says the law creates, quote, widespread economic disruption. That's what it's intended to do. It hurts the backbone of local economies. Yeah, so exactly. This is all by design. It's so when the small guys fold, when they shut down, and people are like, oh no, what are we ever going to do? Then the small guys are going to be looking for an answer for their problem, and the government steps in. That's the game. So where do we go from here? The law is delayed. It's not dead. It's just hiding behind a court date and political smokescreen. So Governor J.B. Pritzker, he signed off on this delay. And don't breathe easy, being that he signed off on this delay. It's a tactical pause. They're going to regroup, and the agenda is still very much real. It's still very much alive. And if this law survives, it's going to set a precedent. Okay, this is the first state to do something like this in the state of Illinois. Then California is going to do it. Then New York's going to do it. And before you know it, your Visa card, it's not going to have Visa on it anymore. It's not going to be the Visa logo. It's going to be a state logo, and it's going to be a hotline to Springfield. Okay, so you wind up with card fraud. Somebody's got your card. Obviously, the state screwed up. They didn't encrypt it. And you're going to have to call up Springfield and be like, hey, I got fraud on my card. And they're going to be like, we'll get back to you in 5 to 7 business days. Please make an appointment online. So that's what's going to wind up happening. And folks, this is not financial freedom. It's not about your bank account. It's not about these merchants paying less. It's about who controls the system. It's about who controls the system that moves your money. This is dangerous. Left isn't chasing fees. They're chasing control. Stay alert. Stay armed with the facts. Okay. Don't let them swipe your freedoms under the rug. That's what they're doing with this. So I want to get to ICE detention centers in Chicago. We know the LA riots. Absolutely insane what's going on there. Mostly peaceful, as CNN says. It's mostly peaceful, They're waving Mexican flags, which really boggles my mind. It's like, okay, you're waving the flag of the country that you are fighting like hell, setting cars on fire in order to not be sent back. But you're waving the Mexican flag. That makes a ton of sense. Not. So this is usual, predictable outrage by the left. It's what they do. Let's start with some truth. Yes, ICE, the scary agency that liberals scream about, they have detained individuals this week outside a this is in Chicago, or Homeland Security office. Okay, so this is in Chicago, near Chicago's South Side. Okay, why? Because they weren't random people walking down the street. They weren't citizens. They detained them because they've broken federal immigration laws. Okay, and the liberals are screaming about this. I'm sure that there's going to be riots. I know there's riots in LA. There could be riots potentially in Chicago. They are screaming, protesting in Chicago. According to ICE officials, every single one of them had final orders for removal. By the way, every single one of them, these detained individuals from within inside the Homeland Security office near Chicago's South Side, every single one of these people had final orders of removal. What does that mean? It means an immigration judge, not Donald Trump, not some guy on the internet, right? This is a judge who looked at the case and said, yeah, based on this evidence, I'm going to rule that you don't get to stay in this country. Okay, so all these people who were detained in this facility, specifically in Chicago, they had final orders. And what did these folks do? They ignored the orders, they defied the order, and they stayed illegally. Okay, so they all had final orders, but they defied those orders, deportation orders. They defied those and they stayed here illegally in the United States. So that's when ICE started to knock on doors and carry out the law. And I don't know, Democrats have lost their minds over it. So the left's manufactured outrage machine. This is also manufactured, by the way. Somebody brought up earlier in the comment section, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. You can find me there. Somebody brought up, they were like, I wonder how much these protesters are getting paid. Yeah. So earlier in the show, I talked about ICER. ICER is Illinois Coalition for Refugee Rights or something like that, Immigrant Refugee Rights. This is a nonprofit organization. They've gotten $63 million in a time period of just 7 months. Just this past year, I think it was, in 2024, I think it was, in 7-month time period, they got $63 million of taxpayer dollars. That's insanity. Okay. And what they do with that tax money, they pay not only, legal representation for these illegal immigrants, but they pay for people to work for this nonprofit, right? And then they send out those workers and they pay these workers with that government money and a little bit of private donations as well. But let's be real, who's really donating to ICER? Okay. So they take their money and then they pay for these people who work for this nonprofit to go out there and cause a scene. Okay, so this is all manufactured. These protests are essentially taxpayer funded. They steal your money to pay these activists, and then they go out there and they tie you up when you're going to work. They burn up your police vehicles. They run around flying the Mexican flag with your tax dollars. That's what's ultimately what's going on here. So Governor J.B. Pritzker, aka the man who never met a federal law he didn't want to ignore. He's all about ignoring federal laws. Okay. DEI, the LGBTQ crap in schools, the transing of kids and allowing trans athletes, trans men to compete against girls in female sports. IHSA, they came out and they said that they're not going to, essentially enforce the federal law, and Governor J.B. Pritzker and multiple others. Democrats here in the state, they've all said that, hey, we're not going to follow federal law, essentially when it comes to these executive orders, anything that President Donald Trump does via executive order, we're just not going to do it. In fact, they went as far as to pass a law just recently where they said, hey, we're going to go off the WHO's standards rather than the FDA's standards. So the WHO, Chinese Communist Party, they're not actual scientists or medical professionals. We're going to go off their standards when it comes to medication and not the FDA. So Pritzker has never met a federal law that he didn't want to ignore completely. So he told reporters, and I quote, there have been inappropriate, sometimes illegal moves on the part of ICE. Excuse me, Governor, what's illegal about enforcing a lawful removal order? A judge signed off on this, a deportation order. They were detained. They were detained at this Homeland Security office near Chicago South Side. It wasn't a midnight raid without any kind of paperwork. Okay, this was an execution of final judicial orders, something that Governor J.B. Pritzker and his pals clearly don't understand or respect. So Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, who claimed that ICE agents kidnapped people and shoved crying grandmothers into unmarked vans. Okay, this is, I don't know what dystopian film Brandon Johnson was watching last night or for this past week. He obviously watches way too many dystopian horror flicks. And he went before this press conference and he says, oh, they're shoving grandmothers into vans. I don't know what horror flick you were watching prior to giving this press conference, but guess what? Law enforcement is doing their job. They're doing it legally. They're not forcing a little old granny who's been a citizen here, her entire life into a van. Okay. But that's what Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and Governor J.B. Pritzker would like you to believe. What's really sickening, Mr. Mayor? It's that your sanctuary policies have turned Chicago into a safe haven for these criminals and for these gangs and lawbreakers. And, this is a wave of migrant crime that you're seeing in Chicago. And I mean, this is this is your fault. You know, if you want to blame ICE, you can't blame ICE for something that's your fault. You marketed your community as a place for illegal immigrants to come and seek a safe haven. So now you're mad because ICE is coming in and they're saying, hey, you broke federal immigration law, we have to detain you. I just don't get it. So Illinois Congresswoman Delia Ramirez even sent a letter demanding the resignation of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. She says ICE is violating the promises made to the migrants who comply with the process. Let me ask you this. What part of defying a removal is compliance? Okay, so they had legal deportation orders drafted up by a judge, and the judge signed off on these things. And these are people who, despite receiving that order from a judge, continued to stay here anyway illegally. That is not compliance. Okay, she's saying that, oh, well, you made promises to comply with migrants who comply with the process. They defied a judge's order. That's not complying with the process. Okay, the judge tells you you leave. And if you don't, you're considered not complying. Okay, you're ignoring the system and you're hoping that the woke mob will shield you. And the woke mob, by the way, is designed carefully. They craft this woke mob within your public school system. So it was very evident. I saw a Normal West graduate, high school. I went to the high school graduation. She walked across the stage and she took out a Mexican flag and was flapping it around like crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, these kids are activists. They're going to graduate. They're going to vote for Governor J.B. Pritzker. They're going to vote for people like Gavin Newsom. And these are politicians who spit all over this nation's sovereignty. We are a nation of laws. We're not feelings, hashtags, emotional sound bites. That's not what we are a nation of. We have a little something called sovereignty, which is very important. And the left is really pushing here for no enforcement at all and no sovereignty. They don't want a border. They don't want a country. They want globalism. Globalism is there's no such thing as countries, and we're all just one big blob. Okay, there's no borders, no countries, no sovereignty. And if you can't detain someone after a judge orders them to be deported, then what exactly is the point of immigration law? Really? This isn't about compassion. It's about control. The left doesn't want an immigration system. They want open borders, no consequences. They want chaos. Okay, because that's ultimately what's going to happen is they want to create this chaos. They want these them to come in and vote. They want voters on demand. They want a voting pool. And ultimately what this is going to do is create chaos, this no border situation. And guess who's going to be right there to be the solution? It's government. And they'll cry about human rights and they'll, stage these protests and they'll be paid to go out there and protest these protesters. And they're screaming about ICE. ICE! And the American families, they're getting crushed at the weight, under this weight that is called crime, drug trafficking, and strained public services. So let me give some credit here. Chicago PD, according to Pritzker himself, followed the law. They assisted ICE when warrants were present. That's all it takes. That's how America works. Warrants are present. Hey, the orders are these people, they violated these orders. They're still here. They're here illegally, despite a judge saying that they got to leave. And Chicago PD complied. Crazy. That's all it takes is like an order that says, hey, I have a deportation order for Juan and he's still here. So yeah. So good for Chicago PD. They didn't hide behind this Trust Act or whatever we've got here in the state of Illinois. The Trust Act, all it really says, and people misinterpret this, the law enforcement agency, the police departments, they misinterpret the Trust Act. They think that, the Trust Act means I can't comply with federal law enforcement. No, that's not it. The Trust Act, all this really says is that, hey, federal law enforcement cannot come in and dictate to you or force you into helping them enforce federal or enforce. So, for example, let me back up here. Maria, say she works at Rivian in Illinois. Okay, Maria is here on a work visa. Her work visa expires. Okay, now say in McLean County, the McLean County Sheriff is approached by ICE and ICE says, hey, we think Maria's work visa has expired. can you go send out some officers to her house and bring her in for questioning? The trust text says, hey, you can't do that. You can't strain the resources of the McLean County Sheriff's Office in this case to kind of do your homework and see if Maria's work visa has expired. That's your job. That's not my job. Okay. But we're not talking about that here. We're talking about, hey, a legal deportation order has already been drafted up by a judge. We know that she's here illegally. We know that Maria's here illegally, and we have to deport her because she did not comply with this deportation order that the judge had signed off on. So don't think that this ends here. You know, Pritzker, Johnson, Ramirez, they're going to be back with more bills, more defiance, and more excuses. And they're going to say, oh, ICE is out there kidnapping grandmothers and throwing them in the back of vans. Like, give me a break. Like, come on. These are deportation orders that are being fulfilled. So I want to wrap this up. Don't believe everything you hear on CNN. These are peaceful protests. The people detained ignored lawful removal orders. These are the people who are being detained. The left is turning this into a circus to try to push open borders and demonize federal agents. They're going to say, see, look at all this chaos here, and look at the federal agents. They're shoving grandmothers into the backs of vans, and we need open borders. We need to be more compassionate, right? And they're demonizing these federal agents. It's all by design. And they're undermining the rule of law in favor of chaos and identity politics. President Donald Trump promised to restore law and order, and now under his leadership, it's happening. Okay, so we voted him in to do this. And of course, the same people who created this border disaster are foaming at the mouth over this. And the American people, we are watching. And I want to be very clear about this. We're not asleep. We are watching this, and we're ready to take our country back. And they'll come out and say it. I mean, Hillary Clinton has said this, Jasmine Crockett, they have said this, where, hey, we have a population crisis in America, and what we want to do is replace that population decline with illegal immigrants. And we want to make sure that we're replacing the American population with illegal immigrants. You know, no, stop taxing your own citizenry to death and make it to where it's affordable to have children. So that way we can have American children here and American families and American values. Because guess what? Not all cultures are the same. Those people are going to come in and they're going to want to bring their culture here to America. Here in America, we have a specific culture that we've created, and it does very well. You know, families, you commute into work, you go to church on Sunday. This is the kind of culture that we've established here in America. Now, there's other people, or there's these cultures, other cultures, and they have people that believe things like child marriage or child brides. They believe things like stoning gay people to death. Okay. We don't believe that here in America, but they're going to bring all of their culture here to America, and we don't want that. Okay. Multiculturalism. This is the belief that all cultures are equal and that they're all great. They're not. Okay. So I gotta go. Actually, that's the end of the show, but I so do appreciate you being here tomorrow. Hopefully we can get into a few things. There is this Democrat-run city using taxpayer funds to hire expensive law firm to defend itself against homelessness corruption. So the city of Los Angeles, they've got the riots going on, but they're also using taxpayer money to defend themselves in this lawsuit. This lawsuit accuses the city of Los Angeles of laundering taxpayer money funds to fix the homelessness crisis. Okay, so this, of course, has only gotten worse. In the city of Los Angeles, they've thrown a ton of money at the homelessness crisis, and it seems to be only getting worse. So the city of Los Angeles, they've poured billions of taxpayer dollars into tackling homelessness, but recent investigations show widespread corruption. Billions of dollars remain unaccounted for. The city is using more and more taxpayer dollars to defend themselves against this suit. So that's kind of hilarious, despite the accusation being that they misused taxpayer funds in the first place. So it's a misuse to use taxpayer funds to defend yourself in this lawsuit. But these people are getting $250,000 salaries, to fix the homelessness crisis in Los Angeles. Yet the homelessness crisis is not fixed. So we're probably going to hit this tomorrow because it has to deal with tiny homes. And Bloomington, they just approved this thing where Home Sweet Home Ministries is going to be doing tiny homes. I'm not accusing Home Sweet Home Ministries of doing what California is doing, where they are laundering money and paying people with taxpayer dollars to not really fix the homelessness crisis. But they built 100 tiny homes in California, in Los Angeles, and these tiny homes, you can barely fit a bed in there, by the way. And the area where these tiny homes are actually built, it actually became a drug park where there's open air drug deals going down. The NGO charges, the non-government organization in charge of these tiny homes, they charge the people $150 per night. So that's $4,500 per month per unit. So that's a lot per unit. That's a lot of money, and they're making $450,000 per month as NGO. Okay, with these people sleeping in given that the people are paying that fee, and these are the tiny homes, and there's drug dealing going on. So we might dig into that a little bit more because they definitely could clear up their homelessness problem like overnight. They've done it before. Remember when the Chinese dictator came in and Newsom cleaned up all of the homeless encampments? They could definitely clean up the homeless encampments overnight. You just kind of enforce soliciting laws, trespassing laws. You enforce those, and boom, homelessness, it goes away. You can't sit here in a tent. You can't publicly defecate in the streets. So they're getting all kinds of taxpayer dollars. They're funneling it into this NGO to eradicate homelessness, but they haven't eradicated homelessness, and really just a bunch of people are getting paid. So it's like money laundering is what they're being accused of. We're going to get to that maybe tomorrow a little bit, dig into it a little bit more because there's a lot there. But I so do appreciate you being here on Conservative Cat. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and share this out with your friends. Tell one person about Conservative Cat today. And if you'd like to support the program, go to patriotpumpenergy.com and go ahead and use the promo code Conservative Cat. That's the best promo code that we've got out there. You have a blessed day. Bye-bye. Love you so much.